The rich aroma of homemade lasagna and freshly baked focaccia bread filled the elegant dining room as I took my seat at the mahogany table. My parents' suburban home, once my sanctuary, felt strangely hostile tonight. I noticed my mother Eleanor's tight smile and my father Victor's averted gaze as I placed the expensive bottle of wine I'd brought on the table. My younger sister Vanessa sat across from me, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her water glass, a subtle smirk playing on her lips. "Cassie, we need to discuss something important with you," my mother began, her voice unnaturally controlled. I felt my architect's instinct sensing the structural failure about to happen. My hand froze around my fork. The tension in the room was palpable, like the moment before a building's support beams give way. "We've finalized our will," my father announced, his professor's voice lacking its usual warmth. "We wanted you to hear it directly from us." Before he could continue, Vanessa dramatically pulled out a document from her designer handbag. "Let me cut to the chase," she said, waving the paper triumphantly. "Mom and Dad are leaving everything to me, this house, the beach condo, all investments. You get absolutely nothing." My fingers unconsciously reached for the knife beside my plate. "What?" The single word hung in the air like a suspended weight. "This house that you've helped pay the mortgage on for years? Mine. The beach property? Mine too." Vanessa's voice dripped with satisfaction. "Sorry, big sis. Guess your fancy architecture degree doesn't buy family loyalty." I turned to my mother, hoping for denial, but she merely nodded. "We believe this is fair, Cassandra. You have your successful firm now, while Vanessa is still finding her way." She delicately dabbed her lips with a napkin, avoiding my eyes. The betrayal crushed against my chest like a collapsing beam. For 10 years, I'd sacrificed expanding my architecture practice to help them, $2,500 monthly for their mortgage, countless medical bills, and Vanessa's endless emergencies after she dropped out of the college I paid for. So after everything I've contributed, I don't deserve even a token acknowledgement. My voice remained steady despite the earthquake of emotions beneath. My mother sighed dramatically. "You always reduce everything to dollars and cents, Cassandra." "This isn't about money," I replied, white-knuckling the knife. "It's about recognizing my sacrifices. Just because I succeeded despite your lack of support for my impractical dreams, I'm now punished." Vanessa laughed, examining her perfect manicure. "No one forced you to play ATM. Maybe if you weren't so desperate to buy our affection, you wouldn't feel so betrayed now." I turned to my parents, waiting for them to defend me. Their silence was deafening. The beautiful architectural space we sat in, one I'd helped renovate and pay for, suddenly felt like a cruel prison of family obligation. "All right," I said, carefully placing the knife down and standing up. "If that's your decision, I have one of my own." "And what's that?" Vanessa challenged, still admiring her reflection in her phone. "From this moment forward, expect nothing more from me." My voice was as precise as my blueprints. "No more mortgage payments. No more bailing out Vanessa's shopping sprees. Nothing." I walked toward the door, my architect's eyes noticing every family photo featuring Vanessa but missing my design award ceremonies. No one called after me. No one tried to stop me. And in that crushing silence, the foundation of my family crumbled completely. I stepped out of my childhood home, feeling the weight of architectural dreams and family betrayal pressing down on me. The suburban house, where I'd once sketched my first building designs on bedroom walls, now felt like a stranger's dwelling. The heavy oak door clicked shut with the finality of a contract being sealed. The October air was crisp against my face, but my temples burned with righteous anger. During the drive to my downtown loft, I left the car's premium sound system silent. The emptiness matched the hollow feeling in my chest. Why was I surprised? Hadn't my design professors warned that family could be the first to exploit talent? In their eyes, I was never Cassandra the architect, just Cassie the reliable bank account. I collapsed onto my Italian leather sofa, trembling hands unlocking my phone. Every word from dinner replayed like a cruel blueprint of betrayal. Vanessa would get everything, the same sister whose influencer career I'd funded, whose college tuition I'd paid before she dropped out, whose shopping sprees I'd financed while postponing my own studio expansion. My banking app opened to my scheduled transfers, $2,500 monthly for my parents' mortgage and utilities, another $1,800 whenever Vanessa claimed she was between opportunities. The numbers represented delayed dreams, the sustainable housing project I'd had to postpone, the international design competition I'd withdrawn from to cover Dad's medical bills. They claimed I was successful enough not to need inheritance, but could they maintain their precious lifestyle without my support? Their mortgage payments were 3 months behind before I stepped in. My finger hovered over manage recurring transfers, heart pounding like hammer strikes. For years, I'd accepted this burden as my responsibility, designing others' dreams while neglecting my own. 1 heartbeat. 2. I pressed cancel all recurring transfers. All scheduled payments successfully canceled, appeared on screen. A complex emotion washed over me, rage and bitterness, but beneath them something unexpected, liberation. I set my phone down and sank deeper into the sofa, feeling lighter than I had in a decade, as if I'd finally removed the structural burden from my own life's blueprint. That night, sleep evaded me. I stared at my ceiling, mentally calculating the total, over $300,000 given to my family over 10 years. I'd sacrificed international architecture fellowships to fund Vanessa's emergency apartment renovation. I'd worked weekends to cover Dad's retirement party. All those sacrifices, and they couldn't spare me even a token acknowledgement of my worth. The next morning, my smartphone exploded with notifications. I watched my mother's name flash across the screen, hesitating before answering the video call. Cassandra. The image of my mother's face appeared, her perfectly styled hair contrasting with her distressed expression. Did you cancel all the transfers? The mortgage payment bounced this morning. I steadied my breathing, studying her face as I would examine a flawed structural design. Yes, Mom. I realized I don't need to be your personal bank anymore. The momentary shock in her eyes was quickly replaced by practiced disappointment. What are you saying? Family supports each other. You know we depend on that money for our lifestyle, our basic needs. I felt my jaw tighten, the same tension I experienced when clients tried to compromise my architectural integrity. Family only matters when I'm funding everything. I've helped for 10 years, postponed my firm's expansion, and still, I'm worth nothing to you. You're being incredibly selfish, Cassie. Her voice rose, her teacher's tone emerging. Is this all because of the will? I told you, everything isn't about money. I laughed with the bitter recognition of architectural irony. Not about money? Then why don't you ask your precious Vanessa to support you? She's getting everything anyway. Silence stretched between us like an unstable foundation. I could visualize my mother's face, the same expression she wore when I announced I was pursuing architecture instead of her preferred career for me. This isn't the daughter I raised, she finally said, her voice trembling with theatrical precision. Mom, this is exactly who I am. You just never bothered to see me. I ended the call before she could respond. Standing in my modern loft with its exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows, a space I'd designed myself, emotions swirled through me like competing structural elements. My phone buzzed again, Dad, then Vanessa. For the first time, I felt no obligation to answer. The family's ATM was permanently out of service. I moved to my drafting table, seeing my space with new eyes. This wasn't just a way station between client meetings and family financial rescues, it was mine, a sanctuary where I didn't need to shoulder anyone else's poor planning. Opening my laptop, I reviewed my financial portfolio. Each line item told a story: $2,500, parents' mortgage, $1,800, Vanessa's emergency, $750, Dad's medical bills. I deleted each scheduled payment, feeling each cancellation like removing an unnecessary support beam, freeing the structure to stand on its own merit. Staring at the screen now showing 0 recurring transfers, I felt a strange mix of liberation and emptiness. I'd spent a decade being the responsible daughter, the one who carried what Vanessa was never asked to shoulder. Without those constraints, what would I design for myself? I stepped onto my balcony with a glass of water, watching the city skyline I'd helped shape with my designs. My phone vibrated with Vanessa's message, WTF Cassie? Mom says you're cutting us off. This isn't funny, I have bills due. I didn't respond. Minutes later, another notification, you're dead to this family. Don't expect us to acknowledge you ever again. I smiled faintly, recognizing the truth in her threat. I was never family, just their financial foundation. Leaning against the railing, I breathed in the crisp air and knew with architect's certainty, I had finally drafted the correct blueprint for my own life. The next morning, notifications flooded my smartphone. I silenced it briefly, then reluctantly answered. My mother's face appeared on the video call, her perfectly styled hair contrasting with her flushed complexion. Cassandra, she snapped, her former elementary teacher's voice sharp with accusation. Have you lost your mind? The mortgage payment bounced. What were you thinking? I took a deep breath, studying the architectural precision of her manipulative expression. I've realized I can't be your financial foundation anymore, Mom. Financial foundation? You're abandoning your family. After everything we sacrificed for your education. I cut her off with a hollow laugh. Sacrificed? That's architectural irony at its finest. I've paid back any debt tenfold. $30,000 for your kitchen renovation. $45,000 for Vanessa's failed business ventures. I've funded this family for a decade. Her lips tightened. You've changed, Cassie. That architecture career has made you cold, calculating. No, Mom. You taught me the calculations when you decided I wasn't worth including in the will, I replied with surprising calm. I'm simply adjusting the blueprint of our relationship. She disconnected without another word. Immediately, messages appeared. Vanessa, Mom's literally crying. Hope you're proud of yourself. Vanessa, when they lose the house, it's on you. Dad, you've disappointed everyone who ever believed in you. Not one question about my feelings. Not one acknowledgement of a decade of financial support. Just rage that their personal ATM had ceased operation. My phone rang again, Dad. I silenced it permanently, then methodically blocked all 3 family members. Done, I set the phone down, closed my eyes, and exhaled. The silence in my loft felt strange yet liberating, no guilt-inducing calls, no manipulative texts. I stepped onto my balcony, breathing in the crisp air, feeling truly free for the first time since graduation. 3 weeks of blessed silence passed. My design work flourished without constant financial distractions. Then Friday evening, an email from an unblocked address, family meeting. Tomorrow, 7 p.m. Be punctual. My mother's terse command, lacking even basic courtesy. Something in my chest tightened. Logic screamed to ignore it, but a smaller voice whispered that perhaps, finally, they wanted an honest conversation. Against my better judgment, I decided to go. The suburban living room felt suffocating as I entered. Vanessa lounged on the sofa, scrolling through her phone with deliberate disinterest. Dad stood by the fireplace, examining the mantel as if the family photos there, notably missing any of my architectural achievements, held fascinating secrets. Mom sat in her armchair, eyes strategically reddened. Cassandra, she began before I could speak, voice quavering with theatrical precision. How much further will you go to destroy this family? I frowned. Excuse me? Dad sighed heavily. Your mother can't sleep. She's worried sick about losing the house. If you continue this stubborn rebellion. Rebellion? I laughed incredulously. I supported this family for 10 years while postponing my own dreams. Mom seemed perfectly fine spending my money then. Vanessa rolled her eyes dramatically. God, you're so self-centered. Do you think the world revolves around your precious architecture firm? You have everything, Dad added. A successful career, that fancy downtown loft. Why can't you just help your family? Is being right worth destroying your mother's health? Their coordinated attack hit with calculated precision. I'd come hoping for reconciliation but found only an ambush of guilt and manipulation. If this is why you invited me, to pressure me into resuming payments, you've wasted everyone's time, I said, rising. I'm not coming back to this arrangement. Mom's face went blank. What did you just say? I stood, scanning the room one last time, the space where I'd once believed I belonged. I've done everything possible to be part of this family. If my only value is measured in dollars transferred, then I don't need this kind of conditional love. No one moved as I walked to the door. No one called my name. I stepped outside, the door closing behind me with the finality of a completed design. 2 evenings later, returning to my downtown loft close to midnight, I immediately sensed something was wrong. The sleek steel door to my apartment had been vandalized, the lock completely filled with what appeared to be industrial-strength superglue, with crude words scrawled across my door in red marker, "Selfish bitch." My heart hammered against my ribcage. This wasn't some childish prank, this was deliberate property damage meant to intimidate me. I instinctively reached for my phone and accessed my smart doorbell security footage. Scrolling through the timeline, I found it, Vanessa, her designer hoodie pulled low but her distinctive walk unmistakable. The footage clearly showed her applying the glue with surgical precision, then stepping back to admire her handiwork with a satisfied smirk before defacing my door. My hands trembled, not with fear but with cold fury. Without hesitation, I called the police. When the officers arrived, I presented the crystal-clear footage. One officer's eyebrows raised as he watched. "Would you like to press charges, ma'am?" he asked, looking up from the video. I gripped my phone, architectural plans for my future suddenly crystallizing in my mind. If I let this slide, the boundary violations would only escalate. Vanessa wasn't just angry, she was dangerously vindictive. I straightened my posture, my voice as firm as a steel support beam. Yes. I want her held fully accountable. The next day, multiple calls from my parents lit up my phone. I ignored them until finally answering one from my father. "Cassandra," he hissed, his professor's voice stripped of all pretense, "your sister was questioned by police. How could you do this to your own family?" I responded with the calm precision I use when explaining structural requirements to difficult clients. "Vanessa vandalized my property and attempted to prevent me from entering my own home. If she wants to avoid charges, she needs to pay for all damages." His voice dropped to a threatening whisper. "How much?" $5,000, I stated without hesitation. "That covers the door replacement, lock system, wall repair, and my hotel stay. This is extortion." He exploded. "No, Dad. In architecture, we call this structural consequence. Actions have costs." The following morning, $5,000 appeared in my account with a note from Vanessa, "You're dead to me. Don't ever contact us again." I archived the message, feeling nothing but the quiet satisfaction of a properly resolved design problem. A notification flashed on my phone, a message from a cousin I rarely spoke with. "Cassie, what's going on? Your mother's posts say you've abandoned the family when they're struggling financially." My stomach tightened. Another message arrived, "How could you cut off your parents and sister? After everything they've done for you?" Opening social media, I immediately understood. Eleanor, my mother, had launched a coordinated social media campaign against me. Her carefully crafted post, complete with an artfully tearful selfie, portrayed me as a heartless monster who abandoned my aging parents and struggling sister despite my lucrative architecture career. The comments section overflowed with sympathetic responses from people who knew nothing about our reality. So sad when successful professionals forget their roots. Parents sacrifice everything, and this is their reward? Guess that fancy architect degree came with a side of selfishness. Fury built inside me, not at these strangers, but at my family's calculated narrative manipulation. Not a word about the $300,000 I'd contributed over the years. No mention of paying for Vanessa's college before she dropped out. Complete silence about the door vandalism incident and subsequent police report. Just a fabricated tale of a cold-hearted daughter who abandoned her loving family. I stared at the screen, contemplating my options. Stay silent and let their fiction become reality. No. I'd allowed their manipulation to control me for too long. I opened my design portfolio website and began a new blog post titled "Architectural Integrity: When Family Structures Collapse." With methodical precision, the same I apply to my building specifications, I detailed the financial blueprint of our relationship, every mortgage payment, every emergency transfer, every sacrificed opportunity. I included bank records, screenshots of Vanessa's demanding texts, and the security footage of her vandalizing my door. I didn't abandon my family, I concluded. I simply stopped being an ATM for people who never valued me as a daughter or sister. I've redesigned the foundation of my life. I published the post and linked it across my professional networks. Within hours, the controlled narrative imploded. Extended family members reached out in shock, having never known about my financial support. My Aunt Amelia called, horrified to learn I'd been quietly funding my parents' lifestyle for a decade. Even my father's colleagues expressed dismay at the disparity between public image and private reality. My phone rang, my mother. I answered coolly. "Delete that post immediately," she hissed, voice quivering with rage. "Your father can't show his face at the university. Do you have any idea what you've done to our family's reputation?" I shared the truth. "Mom," I replied with architectural precision. "You presented your fabrication, I presented documentation. You've humiliated us." She sputtered. "Have you thought about what this does to Vanessa's social media presence? Her followers are asking questions." I held the phone firmly. "Did either of you consider my feelings when you excluded me from the will? When Vanessa vandalized my home? When you demanded my financial support while treating me as worthless?" Silence stretched briefly before she defaulted to her final manipulation. "If you don't remove that post, consider all family ties severed." "Mom," I said evenly, "you severed those ties long ago. I'm simply drawing up the final blueprints." I ended the call. No tears. No regret. For the first time, I felt the clear-headed satisfaction of a perfectly executed design solution. I hadn't lost my family, I'd finally recognized they were never the support structure I deserved. That final video call with my mother marked the last time I heard her voice. After my public revelation, my family vanished from my life. No hostile messages from Vanessa, no manipulative calls from Dad. All communication ceased as if my bloodline had been erased from existence. But unlike before, guilt no longer shadowed me. I was structurally sound at last. Initially, the silence felt strange, architectural negative space where chaos once reigned. Evenings previously consumed by family financial emergencies were suddenly mine alone. No more 2 a.m. calls about Vanessa's urgent shopping crisis, no more cancelled client meetings because Dad needed an immediate transfer. I channeled this newfound mental clarity into an eco-sustainable housing project my firm had been developing. With architecture's precise focus, I completed the designs weeks ahead of schedule, earning both client praise and a partnership offer. Standing in my expanded corner office with its panoramic city views, watching sunlight play across my drafting table, I felt a professional pride untainted by obligation. For the first time, success tasted sweet without the bitter aftertaste of familial expectation. Then I made a decision that would have been unthinkable before. I scheduled a sabbatical. The international travel I'd postponed for years, sacrificed for mortgage payments and Vanessa's failed business ventures, was finally within reach. I booked a ticket to the Amalfi Coast, the architectural dreamscape I'd sketched since design school. When I stepped off the ferry onto Positano's sun-drenched pier, I entered a world previously confined to my sketchbooks. Pastel-colored buildings cascaded down cliffs to meet the Mediterranean blue. Narrow winding streets invited exploration. Ancient stone structures whispered historical secrets I'd only read about in architectural texts. I wandered through the vertical town, filling my professional sketchbook with architectural details I'd never had time to draw. I spent hours in clifftop restaurants, savoring handmade pasta and local wine while studying how the buildings harmonized with their impossible terrain. I wasn't Cassandra the responsible daughter anymore. I wasn't the family financial foundation. I was simply an architect in love with her surroundings. One evening, I sat at a cliffside restaurant, capturing the sunset's glow on the distinctive dome of the church below. "Your perspective is fascinating," came a voice with a slight British accent. I looked up to meet curious eyes. He had classical features, a camera around his neck, and an expression of genuine interest in my drawing. "The buildings here seem to defy structural logic," I replied, gesturing toward my sketch of the vertical town. Without asking, he sat opposite me as if continuing an ongoing conversation. "They're the perfect marriage of necessity and beauty. I'm Julian, architectural photographer. Cassandra, architect." The conversation flowed effortlessly for hours. Julian specialized in photographing historical buildings, capturing their stories through his lens. His passion for architectural history complemented my design perspective perfectly. We discussed flying buttresses and Roman arches without the conversation feeling like the networking events I'd endured back home. When the restaurant closed, Julian nodded toward my sketchbook. "If you'd like a guided tour of some hidden architectural gems tomorrow, I know places tourists never find." For the first time in years, I made a decision based solely on my own desires. I'd love that. The following days unfolded like a dream. Julian showed me secret courtyards with Moorish influences, abandoned villas with revolutionary structural solutions, and viewpoints that revealed the town's ingenious construction. He photographed buildings while I sketched them, each of us appreciating the same beauty through different artistic languages. Unlike my family, Julian never asked about my financial situation. Unlike colleagues, he never evaluated my professional status. He simply valued my perspective, my company, my passion for design. One evening, as we sat on a terrace overlooking the twinkling lights of boats in the harbor, I realized a profound truth: happiness wasn't earned through sacrifice to those who couldn't appreciate it. Real connection came from mutual respect and shared passion. Under Italy's star-filled sky, I'd finally drafted the correct blueprint for my life. Returning from the Amalfi Coast, I stepped back into my modernist loft with an entirely restructured blueprint for living. I was no longer Cassandra the architectural support beam for a family that never acknowledged my structural value. I was stronger, freer, my own designer at last. The following months unfolded with unprecedented clarity. My firm secured 3 major sustainable design contracts. I joined a Thursday evening architectural sketching group, cultivated meaningful friendships, and finally executed the life plans I'd repeatedly shelved to fund my family's unappreciative existence. Then came inevitable ripples from the past. My phone lit up with a message from Aunt Amelia. "Cassie, I respect your boundaries, but thought you should know your parents are struggling. Your father's taking night lectures at a community college, and Eleanor's working retail. The facade of prosperity is crumbling." I stared at the screen, my architect's mind recognizing the predictable structural failure. When I provided financial support, my parents never developed self-sufficiency. They relied on my blueprints rather than drafting their own. Now they faced the reality of their flawed foundation. I set the phone down without responding. Through mutual connections, I learned that Vanessa's influencer dreams had collapsed under algorithm changes, forcing her to take entry-level administrative work. I felt no responsibility for her predicament. She'd had every opportunity to build a solid foundation but chose decorative facades instead. Now she faced the natural consequences of poor structural planning. As December approached, I realized my first independent Christmas would be a test of my redesigned life. Would the absence of traditional family gatherings create unexpected emptiness? Instead, I discovered the opposite, anticipation for authentic connection without obligation. I decided to host a gathering in my rooftop garden, and Amelia arrived first, carrying artisanal pastries and warmth. "I'm incredibly proud of you, Cassandra," she said, embracing me. "Your designs are being recognized everywhere." I smiled genuinely. "You're the only family member who ever acknowledged my architectural passion." Amelia's eyes held both understanding and regret. "I only wish they'd recognized the masterpiece in their midst before demolishing their connection to you." Instead of dwelling on loss, I poured Amelia a glass of Italian wine from the Amalfi region. Soon, colleagues, new friends, and Julian, who had extended his U.S. photography assignment to be here, filled my space with genuine conversation and laughter. That evening contained more authentic joy than any previous holiday, no performances of familial harmony, no pretense, just real connection built on mutual appreciation rather than obligation. At midnight, I stood on my rooftop garden overlooking the city skyline I'd helped shape, feeling something previously foreign, structural integrity. No hidden stress fractures of resentment, no weight of unsustainable expectations, just my life, my designs, and people who valued me for myself rather than financial support. Sitting later in my Eames chair, watching city lights glimmer through floor-to-ceiling windows, I recognized the profound stillness within. I had once believed family obligation superseded personal well-being, that enough sacrifice would eventually earn love. The architectural reality had proven vastly different. Family isn't defined by blueprints of DNA but by structures of mutual respect and appreciation. My parents and Vanessa had never truly included me in their architectural plans except as a financial support beam. The will exclusion, intended as punishment, had actually been the final necessary severance, freeing me from a fundamentally unsound structure. They believed it would force my return. Instead, it liberated me to design my authentic life. I had evolved from a woman carrying impossible structural burdens to an architect of my own existence. I could travel, create, build relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. I could allocate my resources towards sustainable designs and meaningful connections, colleagues who valued my creative vision, friends who appreciated my true self, and Amelia who had always seen my potential. My phone remained silent. No desperate calls, no financial emergencies. They had finally accepted the revised blueprint of our relationship, and I embraced the structural integrity of this new reality. Sipping wine from the Amalfi Coast, a tangible reminder of my transformation, I acknowledged the truth: I had once existed merely as structural support for my family. Now I designed for myself, and this wasn't selfishness, it was sound architectural practice. Cassandra's story transcends personal experience to reflect universal architectural principles of human relationships. We're conditioned to believe family structures must be preserved at any cost, that support beams must never shift regardless of structural integrity. Yet sometimes, the most necessary design decision is removing yourself from fundamentally unsound structures. When your contributions are treated as entitlements, when your sacrifices become invisible requirements, establishing boundaries isn't selfish, it's essential structural preservation. Because ultimately, you are the primary architect of your own life. What architectural choices would you make in Cassandra's position? Would you continue reinforcing unstable structures, or would you redirect your design expertise toward building something worthy of your talents? Share your thoughts below, and subscribe for more architectural narratives examining the structures of human relationships.